The Alien franchise has been completely ruined by terrible sequels and pointless crossovers, but that does not take away from the original movie. Well, technically, first two movies, but today, the focus is on the Ridley Scott classic, and there's a lot of trivia to be found here. So much so I had to expand this to 27 things you didn't know, and to avoid a comment section of I knew them all and you suck, I tried to focus on the lesser-known facts. Classic scenes almost not being filmed, effects made by organic materials, the xenomorph only having about 4 minutes of screen time, which, when you think about it, makes sense, will not be included on this list. The odds are you will know some of these regardless, that's just the way it goes, but if you learn something new, be sure to tell me in the comments down below. That out of the way, let's take a look at some lesser-known facts about Alien. The xenomorph was not shown before the film's premiere. Let's start things off with the alien itself. The true star of the movie, which was, oddly enough, not present in the trailers. Or anywhere for that matter. No details about the creature, no photographs released, and even Alan Dean Foster, the guy who wrote the novelization, wasn't shown any material. It may sound odd these days, but it likely has a lot to do with the film's legacy and is kind of the way it should be. Would the movie really have had the same impact if we'd seen the xenomorph 50,000 times? I have a feeling it wouldn't. Yeah, different time and all that, but if you really want your film's creature to stand the test of time, maybe don't give it away. Probably too big of an ask. Almost recast because of a possible cat allergy. Unknown to many is that Jones the cat is actually played by 4 different cats to fulfill different roles. On the first day of shooting, when Sigourney Weaver shot a role alongside the cat, and reacted badly with symptoms such as a rash and itchy skin, she was almost recast. They figured it'd be easier to find a new lead than replace 4 different cats. I'm sure that would have paid off, but luckily it didn't come to that, as the symptoms were merely a reaction to the spray used to simulate sweat. It's a good thing they resolved that, because if not, it may have been the dumbest recast in history. Yaphet Kotto was instructed to annoy Sigourney Weaver on set. Improvisation is a powerful thing, and so is authenticity, 2 words that heavily define this movie. They also define the memorable dynamic between Sigourney Weaver and Yaphet Kotto, who played Chief Engineer Dennis Parker. I say this because the on-screen tension you'll see between the two is a result of Ridley Scott instructing Kotto to annoy Weaver off-screen to create the convincing dynamic. It was loosely improvised, definitely authentic, and done to nice effect. The acidic blood was an afterthought. If one thing defines the xenomorph's iconic design, aside from the extra mouth, it would be the ever-so-handy defense mechanism, the acidic blood. Something so unique, it must have been planned from the start, right? Well, no. Given the Nostromo is a freight vessel and devoid of any guns, that seemed like a good enough reason as to why they just don't, shoot it. The script was nearly complete without these details, but incidentally it was conceptual artist Ron Cobb who suggested the idea. An idea that would go on to have a slightly bigger effect in the sequels, but oddly enough, not so much here. The death of Parker used bizarre effects. Unlike a lot of other horror movies, the black guy in this case is the guy to last the longest. However, when him and Lambert are set off to obtain some oxygen tanks in the movie's climax, it's no surprise it does not go well. And while Parker's death may not be the most interesting, the effects used to make it definitely are. Given that we see the xenomorph's mouth punch through Parker's skull, a fiberglass replica was made of the actor's head and filled with pig brains of all things. The forehead itself was made of wax, so the teeth could break through, and it all comes together to make a memorable death that seems to be a bit overlooked in the grand scheme of the movie. Given how memorable some of these are, I guess I can see that. Almost had a Star Wars-inspired cast. It's never been confirmed why Harrison Ford turned down the role of Dallas, aka the best demise in the movie, but given he was in another popular space movie, it was likely to avoid being typecast. Oddly enough, Tom Skerritt was the bigger actor at the time anyway, his name even receiving top billing, so the whole star power excuse doesn't really make any sense. Even if he was now played by the household name actor, he would have likely had the same fate. And of course, he would work with Ridley Scott again on the cult classic film Blade Runner, more on that later, but he's not the only Star Wars actor to almost make the cut. As you know, the xenomorph itself would end up being played by an actual human, a decision that mostly paid off, and Balaji Patijo was chosen mainly for his height and figure after being spotted in a pub, but before that the part almost went to Peter Mayhew, who also portrayed Harrison Ford's famous fuzzy sidekick 2 years prior. So, there you have it. Chewie almost killed Han Solo in an event. I've never been a Star Wars fan, but if you are, that's gotta mean something. No sex was determined beforehand. Similar to Tom Skerritt getting first billing despite not even being the lead, it's not the only thing in this movie that would probably not happen today. Just imagine this. You have a concept for a movie, then you write the movie without obsessing with who's gonna have what sex. In fact, a clause was included that all the characters would be unisex, meaning they can be cast as men or women. And you'll see throughout the movie that they only refer to each other with their surnames, as that's the way the script was written. It's a completely insane theory, as we all know gender means everything now, and if you're offended by that, which you definitely should be, it gets worse. I'll explain why that is a few spots from now. For suspense. The cast thought John Hurt was really dying. As you know by now, suspense and authenticity are a running theme throughout this film's development, and the chest-bursting scene is no exception. However, despite the cast not knowing what was going to happen, it wasn't meant to be so convincing that they thought he was actually dying. Sigourney Weaver stated in an interview that John Hurt's acting was so convincing, the cast thought he was literally choking until the whole chest-bursting thing put that fear to rest. It just goes to show that a scene does not become this iconic for no reason, and it's not the last time it'll get brought up on this list. Ridley Scott's sons feature in the space jockey scene. The aforementioned scene that almost didn't get made for budget reasons, and that Prometheus completely fucked. The space jockey scene is not only another one of the film's most iconic, but it also finds a way to reduce the cost and include the director's sons in the movie. Despite appearing massive, it was actually built on a slightly smaller scale, and Ridley Scott's 2 sons, along with a crew member's kid, filled in for the main cast. A solution that pleased everybody in a time before CGI was the go-to move. Wanted to avoid the final girl trope. Alright, back to the controversial topic of who would have what sex. Despite that not being the biggest concern, if you can believe that, they actually had the gall to try and avoid the final girl trope. Okay, to be honest, despite Sigourney Weaver being somewhat iconic for this now, it does make sense that they'd want to avoid this given they didn't care to begin with, and the idea was already becoming cliche with movies like Halloween. However, in a time that's definitely not now, quality was occasionally put ahead of stuff like this. Her screen test was so impressive she was given the role of Ridley anyway, and anybody who's seen the movie will know that her character avoids all and any of those cliche tropes. Didn't stop certain streaming platforms from warning you about this, and that includes Aliens, so I don't know what's so offensive here. The xenomorph was almost played by 2 children and a man. Here's something that'd be interesting to see. At some point in the development, before casting Bidejo to play the part, Ridley thought it'd be a good idea to take 2 children and strap them to an adult, wrap them in rubber to simulate alien skin, and somehow this would look good. You know, when you make these lists, you usually come across things that make you say, I'm glad that didn't happen, but this goes way beyond that. It was an idea by the director, that's all we need to know. It was supposed to be transparent. Yes, originally the alien was supposed to be transparent, or at least translucent, and that would have made for a completely different creature. The problems came in when they attempted to cook the molds, and in the end they decided to go with the classic black tone with the deadlines approaching. However, it's no secret that this shares a universe with Predator, and that it's clearly a direct influence as the Predator can do just that. If the Xenomorphs had that ability, it really wouldn't be a contest. A shared universe with Blade Runner. Speaking of a shared universe, another topic I promised I'd get back to, Blade Runner. Also directed by Ridley Scott, it was stated by him to share the same universe. Specifically, that the Los Angeles presented in Blade Runner is the city that supports the crew that went out in Alien. He also theorizes that the crew might go into a bar on the street where Deckard lives, but no connection is officially made within the movies. Despite that, it definitely makes sense and is a nice bit of information. You Are My Lucky Star cost a lot of money. Money completely pissed away. An iconic scene is an iconic scene, but I don't see this one. A song that gained popularity from its inclusion in Singing in the Rain. In the final scene of the movie, Ridley would for whatever reason hum this song while attempting to blast the alien into space. This was actually Sigourney Weaver's idea, as she thought it would make sense as it would be in contrast to her relationship with the alien. However, after the shot, 20th Century Fox was none too pleased, as it required them to pay a large amount of money for the song's rights. I normally don't side with them, but in this case, I have to agree. It's not like it's the torture scene from Reservoir Dogs. It's definitely memorable, but it's not imperative to the scene. What is imperative is that you hit the like button, because if you don't, then this segment is even more pointless than that song. Subscribing is an option too. Lambert's death was originally different. Everybody talks about the deleted scene when we see Dallas's fate, but I prefer that the way it is. As for Lambert, it was originally quite different. I mean, technically, it was already different from any other kill in the franchise. I don't know what goes on in that scene, to be honest, but believe it or not, we have another fact later that relates more to her fate. As for the original death, it was much cooler in my opinion. It would have seen Parker attempting to shoot the xenomorph and accidentally shooting a hole in the ship's hull, creating a vacuum in which Lambert would be slowly sucked through. The idea would eventually be used in Alien Resurrection, in which the alien baby meets a similar fate. Based on that scene alone, it seems like for whatever reason, they wanted this character to die horribly. Different titles. You're not gonna believe this one, but the minimalistic title that is Alien wasn't the original idea. Dan O'Bannon's first draft was originally called Memory, and another was more on the comedic side with the title They Bite. Don't know if that was meant for comedy, but it was eventually changed to Star Beast, which O'Bannon and co-writer Ronald Shusett wasn't particularly fond of. After reading through the script, they realized how often the word alien was mentioned, and eventually, you know the rest. The space jockey model was vandalized at the film's premiere. Yes, the Alien premiere. What a time that must have been. Walking through the Nostromo's corridor, true-to-life alien eggs, and of course the space jockey set piece used in the actual film. An event of such magnitude, nothing could possibly ruin it. Aside from religious zealots believing the space jockey movie prop is evil and the work of the devil, even though it's got nothing to do with that, and setting it on fire, thus being the end for a famous piece of movie history way before Prometheus pissed in his mouth. The making of the chest-bursting scene. Like I said, the chest-bursting scene is too iconic to only mention once. In order to create the scene, when the facehugger burst through Kane's chest, they laid out a mechanical torso on the table with John Hurt under it with his head, shoulders, and arms protruding through the hole. The torso was filled with animal guts and a small compressed air cannon, which upon activating would cause the torso to burst open. I'll have to use the Spaceballs version for the next part because a movie you can buy on YouTube is obviously too graphic. But at this point, there'd be blood flying everywhere as an alien puppet is pushed through from beneath the table. Sadly, the myth that this was all done in one take is not true, as the mechanism didn't fire the first time, but the important thing is that if any small child stumbled upon this video, they'd be safe. A copyright infringement. What would a movie as great as Alien be without copyright? No, I mean real copyright and infringement, not what YouTube calls fair use. This happened when Fox received a lawsuit by writer A.E. Van Vogt, who had written a science fiction short story in 1939 called Discord in Scarlet. It was a story of a lone survivor of an alien race who infiltrates a spaceship and starts planting eggs in their bellies. It was eventually settled outside of court, but even though I haven't read that, I do question how legit, how reasonable this could be. More legit than YouTube's copyright, no doubt. But nobody owns the concept of eggs being planted inside someone. That's what aliens and sci-fi movies do. The 2019 high school stage production was a big hit. Back in 2019, students at North Bergen High School in New Jersey took it upon themselves to adapt the film into a play. Doesn't exactly sound feasible given no budget, but somehow the production was beyond impressive, with the xenomorph costume itself being near identical. I'd hate to bring up Prometheus again, but they couldn't pull this off. And Ridley Scott was so impressed by this that he donated money to the school to allow them to put on an encore performance, in which Sigourney Weaver even attended to surprise the cast and crew, and this may be the best alien thing since Aliens, aside from maybe one of the games. Still a bit confused because, as we all know, this is offensive now, a commendable endeavor nonetheless. The alien was originally going to be sexually aroused. Another thing that was loosely carried over to Resurrection, the bizarre concept that the alien would be sexually aroused by Ripley. Luckily, Resurrection didn't take it that far, but during the climax of Alien, Ripley was originally going to be completely naked while hiding in the escape shuttle's closet. The xenomorph would spot her and begin curiously touching itself, comparing its body to hers, and it's a good thing this never happened. It was obviously scrapped, but for whatever reason, Ridley considered it again while developing Prometheus. In case you made the right move to avoid that movie, it was scrapped again, but I did say there is a scene that relates to Lambert's death, and this would be it. It's implied that she's literally raped by the alien. At this point, Ripley is the only one who's left, so it was not discussed. But given where the xenomorph puts its tail, the distinctive screams we hear, and the fact that she finds her naked, I can see where this theory comes from. What do we take from this? Well, Ridley Scott's a pervert. The facehugger design was detained at the airport. You know what the problem is with the facehugger? It looks like a gun. Or a bomb. I mean, you can't expect it not to be detained. Okay, that's not the exact reason, but the design did have the customs officials so alarmed, Dan O'Bannon had to convince them it was for a horror movie, in which the official described the images as repulsive. To me, repulsive is establishing that once they attach to you, you're basically screwed, and then 3 movies later, having them pop off like it's nothing. It inspired the video game series Metroid. Given the team members were all affected by H.R. Geiger's work, it's no surprise a lot of the elements were borrowed. One of the most notable is a mini-boss, who becomes an antagonist in a later game, that is named after the film's director, Ridley Scott. Its design resembles a xenomorph in a number of ways, being its elongated head and long pointed tail, but the references to the franchise don't end there. Noticeable similarities include creatures that latch onto the face in the Metroid Prime series, the female lead being the lone survivor while also being scantily clad, and the fact that her gender was hidden or classified in the manual, depending on the region, similar to how the Alien script was written. Don't know if that one's on purpose, but you get the idea. The alien may have been dying in the final scene. Considering the handy making of book and comments from Ridley himself, it seems apparent that the xenomorph is not trying to hunt Ripley in the final scene. During the climax, it doesn't even attack Ripley until it's provoked, and if it really was trying to kill her, it could have easily done so. As we know, in the deleted scene that shows off Dallas's death, we see the xenomorph has created new hosts that are soon incinerated, and throughout the movie, its color does change from translucent gray to black, signifying aging. Personally, I'm glad we have this information because without it, it didn't really make any sense. Unsuccessful alien toys. You know, one thing I really hate is when a popular form of media creates a toy line and then makes decisions based on that toy line. I'm referring to cancellations, but luckily when it comes to a violent R-rated movie, it's not quite as damaging. In fact, it doesn't affect anything, but it does make you question what they were thinking. It had something to do with Kenner and their brand of Star Wars toys, leading other studios to think they could do the same, and somehow this led to Kenner and Fox thinking, well, Star Wars is in space, Alien is in space, let's make Alien toys. Xenomorph action figures, a fucking board game. But in the end, it turns out marketing a movie with graphic violence, strong language, and people's chests breaking open to kids is not the finest idea. A success, it was not. The original ending. This is probably going to be the most well-known fact on this list. Wasn't even going to bring it up, but it's so crazy I kind of had to. As far as the ending of Alien is concerned, it's not the highlight for me, and kind of just what you'd expect to happen. I'm not saying it's bad, aside from the effects, but I was optimistic upon learning of the original idea. It's mainly the same thing, Ripley would still fire the harpoon, but in this ending it would have no effect. Instead it would run at her, break through her mask, rip off her head, slight differences so far, and finally it would sit in her chair, speak in the voice of Captain Dallas, and say, "I'm signing off, hopefully the network will pick me up." Similar to the ending of Blade Runner, which we discussed in the Shining video, Fox was not keen on this, and said he would have to shoot another ending in which the xenomorph dies. Ripley inevitably admitted the final version was better, and if you don't know, the sound of an alien egg opening can be heard if you listen to the end credits. But I think the big question is, what do I think of this? Well, obviously I'm glad they changed it. If they didn't, we wouldn't have had aliens, unless they brought her character back to life somehow. But as a standalone movie, the original idea is a lot more unique and unexpected, and let's be honest, if the happy ending we got was the ending that never got used, I have a feeling we wouldn't be saying, yeah, I wish it had ended that way. But then again, that can be said about a lot of things. A German Shepherd was used to scare Jones. And as always, the only fact that remotely matters is last. That being, in order to make the cat afraid of the xenomorph and hiss, because incidentally it wasn't afraid, they took the cat and a handy German Shepherd, placed a screen in between them, and removed the screen to make the cat hiss. With this knowledge, you will never again look at Alien the same way. Your applaud is not needed. And yes, I am aware they don't actually call them xenomorphs until the sequel Aliens, but we all know what it is, and that was 27 things you maybe didn't know about Alien. If you learned anything new, let me know down below, or just tell me how you know literally everything there is to know about the movie. A new one is in the works, so maybe it won't be as bad as the last two, and I may consider covering Aliens in the same vein sometime before that comes out. For now, I'm the analyst, and remember kids, unless it specifically ties into the plot, there is no benefit to having your antagonistic alien be sexually aroused by the lead. So, you've made it to the end. That's an impressive feat indeed. Since you managed that, I guess check out the gaming channel, in which I cover a variety of gaming topics, like analysis videos, such as this one. If you're into that, then press the link in the description. It's that simple.